And we've got everyone here with us tonight to discuss. Mark, I'm going to start with you. When we look at Donald Trump really leaning in, picking up where Elena left off there, leaning in, right, to the Latino vote, how much does that help him in a state that he actually lost twice, right? If we're talking about New Mexico, when he's got 5 days to go until the election.
Well, I think there's multiple reasons. Number one, New Mexico really got close in 2016. I actually thought it might have been a state that could be flipped in 20. Now, that didn't happen. But so I think there is movement there. Also, a very competitive House race. And I think that's actually the bigger reason, because the one thing people forget about these rallies is we get the data from all the people who were there. They can go to that campaign now, to that congressional campaign. You were at the rally. Make sure you get out the vote. Bring your friends.
Yeah, and the key here is, as we know, as we just heard from both candidates, at this point, it is all about getting out the vote, getting people to the polls, especially if they're your supporters. Speaking of support, in terms of growing support among Latino voters with the GOP, Donald Trump is up. Strongest showing, more popular than any GOP nominee in 20 years. And we're seeing that growing support in down ballot races. How concerning is that?
Well, look, in an election where every single battleground state is virtually tied to the last voter, every single one, my party can't afford to leave a single vote on that razor's edge. So we've got to go after every single voter. There has been a slight erosion of support for Democrats among Hispanic voters. Barack Obama got about 70%. Joe Biden did worse than that, didn't reach 70%, had some issues and challenges in the Rio Grande Valley, but he won the election. It's a very important constituency. I am a New Yorker. Madison Square Garden is in New York. That is where Donald Trump's rally featured a comedian who called Puerto Rico garbage. That is not a good way of turning out Hispanic voters. What Donald Trump is doing today in New Mexico is trying to mop up after that. But there are other issues that are of concern to those voters, and I think both campaigns are going to be litigating those issues. One other thing, we are doing well with Hispanic women, and that's why you see the litigation on issues like choice continuing to be prosecuted across demographics.
Well, when we talk about women, thank you for the segue, by the way, Jane Harris really leaning in, right? Slamming Donald Trump over these comments about protecting women, quote, whether the women like it or not. I just want to play a little bit more of what she had to say at that Phoenix rally a short time ago.
He simply does not respect the freedom of women or the intelligence of women to know what's in their own best interest and make decisions accordingly.
Again, there is such a small slice of the pie at this point that remains undecided. I'm not sure it's more than a crumb, frankly. But highlighting that, right, this also speaks to this issue from both campaigns of, if you support me, I need your vote. This is why she's going after it.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to highlight that so much of this is a reflection of, we're still going back to that Madison Square Garden rally, because something that got, I think, missed is how many of the speakers talked about Kamala Harris as being, and I hate to say it, a prostitute, a low IQ prostitute. They repeatedly, Kamala Harris's intelligence has been insulted again and again and again, including by Donald Trump, who literally called her mentally challenged. And so I think that this is about, we've been talking about how there aren't really that many undecided voters where people are deciding on vote or not. Mm-hmm. And I think for a host of women, for a host of people, the Madison Square Garden rally, which, Megyn Kelly actually made this point, so did Nikki Haley. It was a bro fest. It was a bro fest in an election in which I think gender is going to be a real determinant of who wins. And I think that highlighting these comments and highlighting the fact of how much Trump's campaign seems to be going back to the well of working class white men over and over and over again, and leaving even white women out in the dust, I think that that's something that the Harris campaign is going to continue to do.
And speaking of gender, I think it's interesting because we heard from Charlie Kirk, of course, a Trump ally, warning that the early vote is, quote, disproportionately female, and urging men to vote to prevent a Harris victory. I mean, look, Mark, we know this, right? There are more women registered to vote in this country than there are men, and women turn out in higher numbers for elections. So the reality is, most years, yes, women do decide. I shouldn't be shocked, and yet at the same time, there's always an element of, oh yes, we're saying the quiet part out loud again. I mean, how dare women help decide an election?
Oh, I think women will absolutely decide this election, but I think they're not deciding it on what Democrats hope they're deciding it on. They think every woman believes the same thing on one single issue, where so many of them are struggling to pay for gas and groceries. They're worried about their safety because of the open border and millions of illegal immigrants allowed in by Kamala Harris. They're worried about public safety, and they know because Donald Trump is not a hypothetical candidate. He has a record. Things were cheaper, border was secure, world was safer when he was in office. And so I think when they, aside from those two small groups on both sides of the life in the abortion issue, the vast majority are going to be making the decision about something else.
I see you smiling. Why don't you jump in there?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but Charlie Kirk is right. I can't believe
Okay,
we're
tell us
Charlie Kirk.
more,
Look,
Congressman.
There's a 14-point gender gap right now in the early vote. Now, the early vote is, as you know, it's not dispositive. It gives you a sense of what's happening at a particular moment. But a 14-point gender gap in early voting, 60 million people having cast their vote. What's important is not the 14 points, but where is it coming from? And if it's coming from the moderate suburbs of Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Maricopa County, Arizona, if it's starting to come from Clark County and Las Vegas to counter the significant advantage Republicans have in early voting in the rural counties of Las Vegas, that's a very good sign for Democrats. Those women are coming out because that closing argument of this is a president who already tried to repeal Roe versus Wade and he can go even further. That argument is a compelling argument for women who are trying to make a judgment on who to vote for.
As we look at all of this, there have been, even just this week, right, we're seeing more endorsements. We see J-Lo is going to be there with the vice president tonight. Jane, when we look at this, we also, I believe it was just today, Michael Bloomberg, LeBron James coming out just tonight, endorsing the vice president. I'm just curious, what do you make of especially these very late in the game endorsements? How much could they actually push somebody to make sure they get to the polls?
I think it's a worthwhile reminder. And look, we were talking a little bit about early voting. Let's keep in mind that according to early voting in 2016, Hillary Clinton was going to win West Virginia. She did not win West Virginia. But I think these endorsements, let's keep in mind that Election Day is Tuesday. I know many people have been voting for weeks, but Election Day is actually Tuesday. So I think it still matters. And I think that for many people, it's interesting. Someone, my co-panelist talking about what people remember of the Trump administration, and LeBron's video is what I remember of the Trump administration. I remember the vitriol, and I remember the anger, and I remember at 5 p.m. Eastern every single day, the craziest thing you'd ever heard of would happen. And I remember what that felt like every single day. And I think Democrats pushed back in 2017, 2018. They did again in 2020 to win back the White House. And so I think that these late endorsements, I don't think celebrities actually move that many votes, no matter what Trump thinks about Taylor Swift. But I actually think that it's more of a reminder. It's more saying hey, we're all involved in this. We're all paying attention to this. Steph Curry spoke at the DNC. I think that it's just more momentum moving forward, reminding people you can still get involved. You can still vote.
It is, I have to say, the numbers, if nothing else, it really shows. It's an interesting look at the enthusiasm. Yes. Nearly 61 million people at this point. Nothing to sneeze at. Great to have you all here tonight. Thank you.